Welcome to the NBA 2K G League show. I am your host, Varun Char, and welcome to the show. So on today's episode, we are going to talk about all the two-way contracts that have been pretty much getting signed up till the deadline this past month, and I'm going to give you my grades and my breakdowns of each signing. So the New York Knicks. Now, the Knicks cut two players. They cut Matt Ryan and Jacob Toppin. Now, they were two guys I did talk about in my previous video, actually, because I did think they were going to actually look for a center, which they actually did not do at all. They didn't get center depth in this two-way deadline. They actually added more like forwards in this two-way contract deadline. So they added Marjon Beauchamp, they added Anton Watson. Now, first, let's start with Marjon Beauchamp. Now, Marjon Beauchamp, he was a G League Ignite player, got drafted by the Bucks a few years ago, and then got traded to the Clippers at the NBA trade deadline. He didn't really play much for the Clippers. They ended up deciding to cut him so they could convert one of their two-way players, and then he ended up at least signing a two-way with New York. Now, I think it's a great move to just kind of see him develop. Maybe he can kind of hit some shots, at the three, become that type of, shooter on the wing for guys like for Brunson, to kick out to, so it could work out if he develops his game, but I do think that he does need to continue to work on decision making. I know that was something that people have pointed out about him, and I think it was a smart move for New York to go for a player like him. I mean, he's still pretty young too, so it was a low risk, high upside type of move. Now with Anton Watson, right? He just got cut by the Boston Celtics, and I'll talk about who they signed, but it was a little surprising because Anton Watson was Boston's second round pick. He was drafted in the 50s last year, so it was a little surprising to see him get cut because you don't see a lot of second round picks get cut during their first season on a two-way. Typically you'll see them at least get a full year. So I don't know the full story behind it. I don't want to go out and start saying or speculating. Like, it's very possible that the Celtics decided that they wanted to look for another player, and so maybe they decided Anton Watson, maybe they wanted to move on. Look, we see that Anton Watson, he's a defender. It's kind of what he's known for, but his offensive game is what he's been working on, and I think, that's still something he's continuing to work on. If he can improve with New York on that, I think that he does have the potential to be a really good 3-and-D two-way player in this league. Now, I think he just needs time. He's, he came out of Gonzaga. I think he's probably 22, 23. So he is a young player. Technically, he's not like 18 or 19, but you give him maybe a few years and just kind of see what he does. And so it's a good situation too, I think, for New York to go after a guy like him. So if I'm grading it, though, because I do think they should have gone for a big, because I don't trust Mitchell Robinson's health, if I'm being completely honest, and you never know what happens with Towns. Like, Tibbs does play his guy so many minutes that I'm concerned that Towns could also get hurt. I'm not trying to jinx it, but you just never know. So I think they still should have gone a center. So I'm going to give this grade a C, because I think if they had at least gone a center, they would have been a good move. I've kind of wondered why no team signed Armando Bacot, actually. I thought at least he would have been a candidate for a two-way, because he did look pretty good in the G League recently. He's been having some really good stints with the Memphis Hustle. So moving on to the Atlanta Hawks. Now, they signed Jacob Toppin on a two-way contract. It was a good move too for Atlanta, because I think Jacob, he didn't get a lot of opportunities with the New York Knicks, and so now he does actually with Atlanta, especially for a team who's probably not going to be making the playoffs at this point, and so they can kind of just give him some playing time to see how he does for the rest of the season. Maybe decide, okay, do we want to keep him for our summer league roster? Do we want to invest in him longer term? So if I had to grade this Hawks move, I'll say this was probably about a B+. Now, the Boston Celtics, the guy they cut Anton Watson for, Miles Norris of the Memphis Hustle. Now, Miles Norris has been, he went undrafted in 2023. He signed with the Atlanta Hawks on a two-way, and then, they ended up cutting him, and they signed, I think, Vit Krejci, but he ended up going to play with the Grizzlies, their G League team, the Memphis Hustle. So, he's kind of been having a good year at points. I mean, against the main Celtics, he was, I believe, 9 from 18 from 3. He had probably his best games were actually against the main Celtics. So I'm sure that caught their attention. And so the Celtics decided, okay, let's look at him. He can knock down shots. If he can improve his defense, he could be a valuable candidate for this team. So I think it was a good move. I'm sure he'll be on the summer league team as long as he has a good rest of the season with Boston here. And it'll be fun to watch him play more with the Celtics organization, especially one that really values shooting, because he's definitely a shooter for sure. So if I have to give this a move, I'll probably say an A. Okay, so the Brooklyn Nets. Now, they converted Tyrese Martin, which was kind of expected. He was having a really good year with the Nets, probably his best year in his career, actually. And then it was actually interesting because they converted Kendall Brown, who they really only had for about a week, and then they cut him to sign, who I did talk about in my previous video, actually, Tyson Etienne. So they signed Kendall Brown to a two-way contract. Now, a lot of times I do always wonder with teams, do they sign guys for two-way contracts because maybe they're not making a lot in the G League? Now, Kendall Brown, I don't know if it had an Exhibit 10 because he was cut by the Pacers on a regular standard contract. So technically, he could have very likely signed a G League contract, which he would be making like $40K a year in that ballpark. So at least him getting the two-way contract for a week at least gives him some more money, for himself. And so maybe that was part of why they did that. But also it's possible that they just decide, let's sign Tyson Etienne because we really like him and we actually want to move forward with him. So he's having a really good career year with Long Island after playing for the Skyhawks for the past 2 years, and finally after his third year in the G League, he gets his first NBA call-up. So it'll be fun to watch him in a Brooklyn Nets uniform. So if I'm giving this a grade, I think going after Tyson Etienne, I'll definitely give this a B+. The Charlotte Hornets decided to cut Isaiah Wong, and they signed Damion Baugh, who is the point guard from Westchester. I mean, if you might have seen, he had actually about over 10 to 20 assists in like 1 or 2 games in the G League. It was an insane stretch where he was just playing really great basketball. So like I talked about in my previous video, GMs, they look for how to improve their roster on the margins, and if they can look for other two-way guys, they're going to do that. They're looking for the best two-way contract players for the position that that fits the organization. And so they decide, let's move on from Isaiah Wong, and they'd sign Damion Baugh. So Damion Baugh, he's a good passer. He's been playing minutes actually with the Hornets, and I think even KJ Simpson kind of has been back to Greensboro. So right now Baugh is kind of getting NBA minutes. They also signed Wendell Moore, who after Moussa Diabate got converted, they decided to sign Moore to a two-way. And I found that was a good steal because there's been some games where Moore had some good points with Detroit. So it was a good move from the Hornets to go after him, and I think it was a low-risk, high-reward situation. So if I'm giving them a grade, I definitely would have to say an A here because I think both of those guys have some potential to help the Hornets this year and maybe even next year. So for the Chicago Bulls, signing Jahmir Young was a great pickup because, Young is a scorer, but he can also find his teammates. I saw him play for Grand Rapids Gold. His three-point shooting is something he's continuing to work on, but, he does have the ability to find his teammates. He knows the spots to where to get them to, and, he was somebody who I honestly thought was going to get called up at any point, and, he did. And so, it was actually similar to like last year when the Grand Rapids Gold had Andrew Funk, who actually did get called up to the Windy City Bulls. So pretty similar situation here. But at this point, you might as well play Jahmir Young if the Bulls aren't going to make the play-in. You just see what he has, what he can do in an NBA court, and if he can continue to improve his three-point shooting, it could be a great move, honestly, for Chicago. So the Cavs cut JT Thor, and they ended up to sign Nae'Quan Tomlin. Now, Nae'Quan, he was with the Cleveland Chargers this year, and Thor, he didn't play a lot of minutes with the Cavs. He's somebody I kind of thought they would have potentially moved on from if they decided to sign a different player to a two-way. So Tomlin actually signed a 10-day contract recently with the Cavaliers, so it's kind of, it gives him a sense of trying him out with the Cavaliers from after playing with the Charge, and then kind of see if they wanted to convert him, which they end up doing. So now with Tomlin, he's been with the organization for a year. He's an athletic forward. I saw him play. He can get up. He's a long, lengthy type of four. Those type of things you see in a forward. So, but I think he can play at a 4. He plays a 5 with the charge, and so we'll see kind of how he fits with the Cavaliers moving forward. But it's somebody who they'll probably invest in even for summer league, assuming that he does play well, or even whether it's practice or with just even continue to impress the front office for the rest of the season. I think he could even be with the summer league team. Now, so if I did have to grade this move, I'll say definitely a B+. But JT Thor, I'm going to kind of shift to the Wizards here. The Wizards did convert Justin Champagnie, who they thought, he was going to look pretty good. And I felt that too. I talked about that in my previous video that, he's been looking great this year with the Wizards, and he deserved his contract to be converted to an NBA standard one. And so it did. And so they had it open to a spot, and they decided to sign JT Thor. Now, my thoughts personally, I'm not a huge fan of the move. I'm nothing against JT Thor. I like him as a player, but I wonder if this was the right move for the Go-Go/Wizards. Now, this really, in my opinion, is probably more for the Go-Go than the Wizards, because JT Thor isn't somebody that they can sign again on a two-way for next year, because his eligibility for two-way contracts ends actually after this season. This is technically his 4th NBA year, so he won't be eligible to play for the Wizards on a two-way. So you'd have to really impress with the Go-Go and the Wizards for him to really consider giving him a 15-man roster spot. So I do think this was more for the Go-Go. And also the assistant coach, Nick Freeman, he did actually coach JT when he was an assistant coach for the Charlotte Hornets. It was cool because, he's going to be reconnecting with Jalen McDaniels and Leaky Black. But, with JT Thor, I like the defense he can bring. I liked what I saw when he was playing with South Sudan in the Olympics. But I think the Go-Go's, my concern sometimes is that I think they don't think they need a point guard, and I think they don't need a point guard because they move the ball so much, but that also creates more turnover issues. And I've noticed that when they do turn over the ball, other teams can get in transition, and they have a hard time stopping teams when they get in transition. And so I don't know how they could have really stopped that. I mean, who they could sign to really do that. I thought maybe they should have signed a point guard, but I don't know. I mean, I just think getting JT Thor, that's a lot of forwards. That's a lot of, guys who are going to be playing big positions. Maybe they want to work on improving their defense. So maybe that was part of why they signed JT Thor. But, now guys like John Butler Jr., Mohamed Gay, who is just gone back from injury, will kind of now see their minutes go down. So it makes me wonder, are they going to start trading guys? Maybe they trade for more like guards. So I don't know if I'm a fan of this move, so I'm actually going to give this grade a D. But yeah, that's just my personal opinion. Alright, so moving on to the LA Clippers. Now, they converted one of their two-way contract players, and they had an open roster spot. And then they also decided to cut Kai Jones. Now, they ended up calling up Patrick Baldwin Jr., who's been playing really great basketball with the San Diego Clippers. He entered the waiver pool, and the San Diego Clippers acquired him. And then he actually got called up to the Clippers on a two-way. And so, he was one person of those two ways. And then the other player who got called up, or technically is now back in the league again, is Seth Lundy. Lundy got cut by the Hawks in December because, he had I believe it was a bone contusion in his foot at the time, but, he's healthy again, so the Clippers decided to sign him. He's definitely like a three-point shooter type of player. So, Kai Jones, obviously, gets cut, but if I'm giving this a grade, I'll probably definitely say an A- because I think it's a good. It helps add shooting to San Diego, who's still kind of in the bottom of the Western Conference standing. But it could be great for the Clippers because it also adds some shooters for the LA Clippers. So going to the Dallas Mavericks now. Kai Jones ended up actually signing a two-way contract with the Mavericks. They ended up cutting Kyler Kelly, who was with them on a two-way contract, and he didn't play much with the Mavs, to be honest. I mean, he played maybe like 5 to 8 minutes a night, and a lot of times he didn't play at all. So he's somebody I thought was going to get cut if they had to sign Kai Jones. So that is what ended up happening. But Kai Jones had a really great game in his first Mavs game, and unfortunately now I think he's out a little bit long term with an injury. I mean, yeah, just the Mavs. If you're a Mavs fan, listen to this. I'm keeping you all in my thoughts right now, but yeah, but I do think getting Kai Jones was the best thing you could do right now because, after Moses Brown, the Mavs right now, they can't even sign Moses Brown back because they're technically hard capped. I think for the last 3 days of the season is when they're able to sign another player. I think part of that was because they traded for Caleb Martin, who had a bigger salary, so that kind of put them in this position. So ended up kind of hurting them actually more than they initially probably thought. But, let's see, maybe the last 3 days, which, I mean, if they don't even make the play-in or the playoffs, I don't even know if they'll sign anybody at this point. But yeah, at least getting Kai Jones was a great move. So if I'm going to grade it, I'll probably definitely say this was an A. The Golden State Warriors converted Quentin Post to a regular contract. Now, he's been playing minutes with the Warriors, has had really good stretches with Golden State. So they actually signed a guy from the NBL whose name is Taran Armstrong. Australian player. He's a tall point guard. I think he's like 6'6". The way he kind of plays, he pulls up in transition. He's that type of player. It kind of reminds me when the Bucks signed Jared Galloway, who was with the Sydney Kings last year in the NBL. So it's cool to see NBA teams are kind of looking at the NBL more these days to sign players on two-way contracts. And I think Taran, he hasn't played much yet with Santa Cruz. I mean, I'm sure this is more of a, let's see how he plays with Santa Cruz this year, see how he plays with the Summer League team. If they like what he continues to do, keep him on his two-way contract. If they don't, or they see other players that interest them more, they'll sign those guys. And then, that's similar. I mean, that's kind of what happened to Galloway last year. So I think that's a similar situation that could happen with Taran Armstrong. But being 6'6" as a point guard, I think that is really nice to see. I mean, they're looking at other point guards. You never know if one of their second or third string point guards gets hurt on the Warriors, so they gotta always keep thinking about who's gonna be our next point guard up on the roster. And so even if he's like the fourth point guard on the team, you just have to keep continuing to develop guys who can be ready, when needed. And then we also saw that they converted Pat Spencer, who's really not played many games with Santa Cruz and has played a lot of Golden State. Obviously, I talked about him last year in actually one of my videos. He had a huge story from being a tryout player, being a lacrosse player. But good for him. And, they signed Braxton Key from the San Diego Clippers. So Braxton Key, former UVA player, I'm going to say this, go Who's, but Braxton Key, is probably one of the really best defenders right now in the G League. And so the perimeter defense for the Warriors was something I think that they could have really improved on. And getting Braxton Key was definitely a smart move. And he definitely brings defense to this team. And if he plays well enough, he could be somebody that maybe the Warriors decide to give, that last roster spot to for the rest of the year. Braxton Key is not eligible to sign a two-way contract after the season. He's technically in his fourth NBA year by signing this contract, so he wouldn't be able to play a two-way next year. So he's really trying to play for a 15-man roster spot. But it was a great signing, I think, by Golden State. Okay, so giving Golden State a grade, I'm gonna definitely say this is a B+. You got a young player who could potentially invest in, and then you got somebody who maybe could help this team potentially for the rest of the years. Now, the Philadelphia 76ers signed Jalen Hood-Schifino. He was the point guard, part of that whole Luka trade. He was the Lakers last year, and then gets traded with Jazz, and then he gets cut by the Jazz. And so the 76ers decide to take a chance on him and see what they can get from Jalen Hood-Schifino. At this point, the 76ers are just not going to make the playoffs. You might as well just play him, see what happens, and see what you're able to get out of him. They ended up cutting David Roddy, which I thought was a bit surprising, because Roddy signed a 10-day. It seemed like they sent him to play with the Delaware Bluecoats. Felt like they were investing in Roddy, so I was kind of surprised they cut him this quickly. But like I said, GMs are looking at how to best improve the margins on their roster. So who knows? Maybe they really intrigued by Jalen Hood-Schifino and they decided to sign him and then cut Roddy. In addition, the 76ers also signed Alex Reese, who's been having a good year with the Rip City remix. I'd say that he's had a cool story. He was a player who was, I believe, he moved furniture. He was a bartender. He tried out for the G League. Then I think it was a Rio Grande Valley Vipers signed him, and then I think he was cut, but then the Rip City Remix acquired him, and then he actually ended up having a good year last year, and then this year he made OKC's final roster. So it was cool to see his journey. It was nice to see he got a two-way. He just adds some more center depth to the 76ers, especially if Andre Drummond's hurt or Joel Embiid is out for the rest of the season. So it helps add some depth to the 76ers. If I'm giving this a grade, let's give this a B. But now top at the Houston Rockets. The Rockets converted Nate Williams, who probably out of all of their two-way contract players was probably the one being utilized the most by the Rockets, who the Rockets kept him probably more with the team this year than the other two-way players. But they ended up signing David Roddy, actually, to that two-way contract. Again, David Roddy, he's bounced around with some different teams over the past couple of years. He has the ability to knock shots down. I think in his G League debut for this season, he had like over 30 points. So he can be that 3-and-D type of player. I mean, he's really strong too. I've seen him play at Summer League with the Suns, so he does have the potential to be that type of player. He just has to work on knocking down shots. He has to be able to defend, and if he can do those things, he can be a good player for the Rockets to invest in. So if I'm going to give the Rockets a grade here, I'll probably say this is a B. Okay, so the Los Angeles Lakers had cut Armel Trory and signed Jordan Goodwin. Now, Jordan Goodwin, as a lot of Lakers fans are really happy about, he's been phenomenal, especially after they traded away Max Christie. I mean, Jordan Goodwin's really come in and has kind of taken Max Christie's role with the Lakers. And, I thought they would have converted him to a standard contract, and there was some talk about them cutting Cam Reddish, but it ended up not happening actually. And that also means he won't be eligible for the playoffs. And similar to the situation with Trey Jemison, who's been playing well with the Lakers, he also won't be eligible for the playoffs. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with those guys moving forward. But it seems like they're investing in both of them long term. With Jordan Goodwin, now he's not eligible to sign any more two-way contracts after this year. He's in his fourth NBA year, so technically his eligibility ends. And so they could keep Trey Jemison on a two-way even after this season, but who knows, maybe they'll convert his contract this summer. But it's very possible Jordan Goodwin's contract also will get converted with the Lakers this summer. But he has quite a journey. And getting both of those guys was honestly a good move. But I like the Jordan Goodwin move, so I'll definitely have to actually give this an A for the Lakers. So the Milwaukee Bucks, they cut Liam Robbins, who was a player they were investing in. Bucks were looking at to bring on Exhibit 10 with the Wisconsin Herd. They traded for his returning rights last October, but he impressed well enough that the Bucks ended up keeping him on a two-way contract. Now, they ended up cutting him recently because they signed Pete Nance, who is the brother of Larry Nance and is the son of Larry Nance Sr. Now, Pete Nance was with the Cavs. He was with the 76ers. He returned to the Cleveland Charge after his two-way with the 76ers ended. And so, Pete Nance is a stretch four type of player, and I think offensively he can help the Wisconsin Herd, who have not been a phenomenal team this year. But it helps that team definitely, because the Charge were also, I'd say, a pretty good team when they had Pete Nance. And now you look at them also converting Ryan Rollins, who was kind of expected because he's played a lot with Milwaukee this year. I don't even think he played with the Wisconsin Herd this year on his two-way. So they signed Jahmir Baugh from the Austin Spurs, which for Austin they also had Malachi Flynn, who got called up. So that's two guys for Austin Spurs, who are the number one team in the West. Jahmir Baugh, I think he was a really good move. He was a good signing for the Bucks because Ryan Rollins is actually hurt right now. So you need a third string point guard, and say Kevin Porter Jr. or Lillard gets hurt, then Jahmir Baugh is going to play potentially. So and he definitely helps. I mean, when you get a guy from one of the top teams from the West, you bring him to your G League team, he can definitely help that G League team get better. So I like it. I think this was definitely, I'll give this move an A. I'll give this grading an A for Milwaukee. Okay, so the Minnesota Timberwolves converted Jalen Clark and ended up signing Bones Highland to a two-way contract. This was a great move for Minnesota because Bones Highland, he's a he's definitely a scorer. He's going to kill in the G League for sure. And, he can go out and just get them a bucket if they really need that. And so this was definitely a good signing for sure. Honestly, it might have been a steal, to be honest, because Highland, he got traded to the Hawks. He didn't play because they cut him immediately, but getting him on a two-way that adds so much scoring ability, adds some offensive power to the Minnesota Timberwolves, definitely helps the Iowa Wolves, who are really struggling right now. But it's going to be really fun. And if you're a G League fan, you got to watch that game between Bones Highland and Isaiah Thomas, because that was a really insane game. Both of those guys had 30 each. So Timberwolves fans, I think this was a great move. I'm going to give this actually an A. So the New Orleans Pelicans had converted Brandon Boston, who didn't really play for the Pelicans on a two-way. He's been playing really well with the Pelicans this year. So they converted his contract because they had to get to 14 spots. And they signed Jalen Crutcher, who I think it could have been a similar situation, maybe getting him some more money on a two-way contract, because they cut him pretty quickly. It was only for about 4 or 5 days. And then they signed Lester Quinones, who, if you are a Warriors fan or 76ers fan, he played for the Warriors and the 76ers the past 2-3 years. So, Quinones, he's deserved this. He's played well in the G League this year. So it's cool to see him get rewarded with the Pelicans. Now, if I have to give this a grade, I'll definitely say a B. But I think at this point, you might as well just see what you can get out of Quinones, because the Pelicans just aren't going to make the playoffs, and you might as well play some of these guys to just kind of evaluate them long term for your organization. The OKC Thunder converted AJ Mitchell, who was on a two-way contract, their second round pick from this year's draft. He didn't play at all with the Blue because he played so well with the Thunder, kind of taking that Josh Giddey role in the second unit. He definitely has played good basketball, and so they probably initially were hoping that Nikola Topic would have fit that role. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Nikola Topic when he comes back this summer. Him playing well, they end up converting that contract, and so they signed one of your centers, Brendan Carlson, who was, he was on 10 days with the Thunder. He was on a regular roster spot, and then they had to cut him. And so it was just a matter of time, because I always knew AJ Mitchell was going to get converted, and I had a really strong feeling they would just bring Brendan Carlson on a two-way. Brendan Carlson's deserved this. He's at points played well with the Thunder, and he's played well, especially in the G League. So this was a good signing for the Thunder. So if I'm giving this a grade, let's just say an A. The Orlando Magic signed Ethan Thompson to a two-way contract. I believe this was about a few weeks ago, or maybe a month ago. But signing Ethan Thompson was definitely a good move, because I was waiting for the Magic to fill that last two-way contract spot. Ethan Thompson, he's really worked for this moment, and he finally got his two-way, his NBA chance. He's probably one of the top three-point shooters for the Osceola Magic team, so he definitely is going to add some shooting, because I think that's the thing that the Magic are still kind of struggling with, is their three-point shooting. And so getting someone like Ethan Thompson, it'll just be adding some more three-point shooting to the Orlando Magic. Now, the Portland Trail Blazers cut Taze Moore at the February trade deadline because they wanted to sign CD Sissoko on a two-way contract. Now, I like CD Sissoko a lot. He's a really young player. He's I think he might be like 20, 21. He's from France. Played for the Spurs after he got drafted by them in 2023. Played for G League Ignite the year before, and it's cool to see him reconnect with Scoot Henderson, his G League Ignite teammate. The Trailblazers actually had interest in him, and so they decided to sign him to a two-way. I think he had said that he maybe had worked out, or maybe they had interest in drafting him. So it's cool to see that he's able to play for the Trailblazers. I know a lot of fans on Twitter were, really excited about him. So it's a good move, I'd say, for Trailblazers. I mean, he's young. You might as well invest in him. So if I have to give this a grade, I'd say an A-. And for our last team, we're going to talk about the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors converted Orlando Robinson to a standard contract, and they signed Jared Rhoden to a two-way contract. Now, we saw Jared Rhoden got a 10-day call-up, so it was a possibility of him potentially being somebody for them to evaluate on a two-way. Because maybe there was reports and rumors about them looking at converting Orlando Robinson and then signing a guy to a two-way contract, which is exactly what happened with Jared Rhoden. So with Jared Rhoden too, he played with the Raptors recently. Actually, all of their two-ways did, minus Aldridge Chomsky, but Jared Rhoden we saw play actually against the Orlando Magic along with AJ Lawson. It's cool to see those guys get NBA minutes. I mean, they work really hard. So, and Rhoden was actually on a two-way contract with the Hornets earlier this year, but then he got cut, so he returned to the Raptors, and now he gets as two-way with the Raptors. Now, Jared Rhoden, he's also been a really good three-point shooter. He's been shooting about 39% from three with the 905. So, I'd say good move for the 905. Good move ultimately for the Raptors. So I'll have to give this grade B+. But yeah, that's it for this video, guys. If you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to leave them down below. I'm curious too, what would you grade these players? Do you agree or disagree with what my takes were? Feel free to let me know. But if you watch this video, feel free to subscribe, like, or dislike, because hey, you do you. So this is the NBA 2K G League show. I'm your host, Varun Chara, and have a great day.